Okay, let's say our blessing together. Ends with La'asuk b'divrei Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asuk b'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord our God, rule of the universe, who has made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. So before we busy ourselves with the words of Torah, and tonight we literally have some to start us off, I wanted to ask a question, get the thoughts of the group. I have noticed that sometimes we lose momentum with volunteering, with people volunteering to read. We always manage to find someone, but it slows us down a little bit. So I was wondering if you would be interested in amenable call to read not any English. If you would put that in the chat, a private chat to me, and then we'll see for tonight as an experiment if this is any better.
David, you were breaking
Yep.
the problem.
Yeah, you better repeat it, David.
Better repeat it. Okay. So in the interest of not losing momentum on waiting for people to volunteer to read, I was wondering if it'd be worth trying me calling on people to read only English. And if you would be amenable to being called on, if you would send me a private chat so that I know who to ask to read another English selection and who not to. So I'll give you a minute if you're so inclined to send me a message, and then we'll go from there.
I don't know where to get to a private chat. I hate to sound dumb, but I don't know how to pull up your thing to send to a private chat.
Where it says,
I'll just do it.
It says everyone, just click on that and you should get a list.
From the everyone's?
Yeah, do you see the chat? We're in the chat.
I gotcha. Thank you very much. Thank you. He always helps me out.
okay. Thank you. I will try to hang on to this list, and we'll see how this goes tonight. So with that, Simon, would you read our first two texts, please?
From Exodus, who is like you, O Lord, among everything which is worshipped? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in splendor, working wonders? And the Lord will reign forever and ever.
Thank you. And the context?
Context. It's small.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Hold on. Yep. There we go.
Much better. Context. This text comes from the biblical book of Exodus after the Israelites crossed the Sea of Reeds. It is a prayer that we say every morning and evening. What questions does this text raise for you?
Thank you. All right, so in this case, I am going to read the Hebrew because I'm going to guess it will sound more familiar in Hebrew than it does in English. Mi chamocha ba'ilim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osefela. Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed. All right. So,
One
little hard to
question
get-
I have
yeah.
is right at the beginning. Who is like you, O Lord, among everything that is worshipped? What is everything? I thought God was the only thing that is worshipped.
Ah. Good question.
What else do we worship
All right. We'll get to
besides
that.
money, gold, and whatever,
We,
and our
That's cer-
spouses?
we don't, but everybody else has things that they worship. So when you look at all the stuff that people worship, who's like you, O Lord?
Hmm.
Okay.
Good. What other questions are there?
Yeah, I think the translator, I hope I'm not stepping on any toes here, but it's used a lot. The translators deserve that question because they stepped right into it. Because it just says among the gods, and then you can deal with that question rather than or with this, forgive me, this mealy-mouthed way of avoiding the texture and the layers of our liturgical, of our expressions, because that's what it says, and you can argue about what gods are and what that means and so on. But you might as well start out with a little intellectual honesty and then deal with that rather than pretend it says something else. That's my completely objective response.
Great. Thank you.
And to try to put yourself in this situation, might there have been a desire to worship Moses?
Ah. It is certainly an interpretation that at the end of the Torah, nobody knows where Moses is buried because there was a concern that Moses would become a shrine, or Moses' burial place would become a shrine, and a site of pilgrimage for people to go and pray for things, like has happened to most other people that we know who are biblical figures who we know where they're buried or think we know where they're buried. Other questions?
You think that even though God is so many things, that this is more particularly referring to the miracle of splitting the Red Sea? I mean, maybe it's, I mean, obviously over time it's come to be used for so many other metaphors, but wasn't originally focused on that miracle?
Ah. So that's an interesting idea, Don. What yours, I don't know if you're intentionally suggesting this, but by placing it back in the context of these words being said right after the Israelites crossed the sea, it could be drawing a contrast between the Israelite God and the Egyptians' gods, that the Egyptian gods weren't able to save the Egyptian soldiers from drowning in the sea, but the Israelite God was able to save the Israelites from the sea.
Yeah, I think that's a good, I mean, that's exactly, David, what I was thinking of, because I mean, over the millennia, we've come to, because it's in, 2 services a day, we've come to use it to reflect on everything, why is everything? But I think the intention here is more narrow. That's just my
Actually, when Phil gave his interpretation, it spurred me to pull out my Everett Fox translation. And there's a footnote which is exactly what Don just said. For among the gods, it says the sea is the scene of YHWH's final triumph over the gods of Egypt. So in his mind, at least, it's a direct reference to the gods of Egypt.
Which would make sense that in the experience of the Israelites who said these words originally, that which was worshipped is either their God or the Egyptian gods. they don't know from like Native American great spirits. It's what they directly experienced or experienced worship of.
So I've got Eitz Chaim here, which has the JPS translation. And it says, "Who is like you, O Lord, among the celestials?"
Interesting.
Who are the celestials?
That would be the logical question without translation.
Well, what does it really mean in the Hebrew? That's the essential thing.
So a quick dive into the Hebrew. The word that we're looking at is ba'elim. And inside that word, we have Aleph Lamed, which is also inside one of our names for God, or several of our names for God. El, Elohim, Elohecha, Elohe. It all has Aleph Lamed in it. And names that have El at the end, like Daniel or Daniel, Michael, come from Hebrew, Ariel, Ariel, Daniel, Michael, who is like God. God is my judge. God is my lion. So when we see Aleph Lamed, that is a Semitic root for God. Even Allah comes from that A-L, Aleph Lamed, Semitic name for God. And so there's a lot of like anthropology of comparative histories looking at that sort of thing.
But you see this in other prayers as well, where you'll have no other gods before me. You don't go astray and worship. But it's not that it only appears here. You find that throughout the text. So
yeah.
Why the sudden surprise now?
Good questions.
In the JPS translation, in the Ten Commandments, I was just looking for that very passage, and I think it just says, "You have no other God before me." Gods before me. It doesn't say you have no other celestial beings before me, because there they had to at least address that issue. And it doesn't really say there aren't any, by the way. It just says none of them should be preferred to me, or you can argue about whether it means you can have them in addition behind me, or whether it means you cannot pay them any mind. But the notion that there aren't any others is, I don't think, clearly developed there. That's from what I've read. I that's obviously contested, but and anyway, I would say that the Aleph Lamed is really not the name. It is a reference term, but I don't think it's the name of the God. So maybe I take a little issue with what you said before. I don't know that it's the name. So that in the Arabic or in the Muslim dogmatic statement, you shall have, there is no God but Allah, or there is no God but this God with this name. I guess it becomes a name there, but otherwise it's just a term for a God. Am I off base with that?
All right. Well, God with a capital G versus God with a lowercase g. Let's move on to see what Simon, yes.
I'm just looking at Eitz Chaim, and they explain first of all, their translation is celestials, and then they explain it. These are the hosts of ministering angels imagined as surrounding God's throne, waiting to be of service. So their take on it is this is God among, God's helpers, as opposed to things or beings that are other than God, than godly. Or,
Interesting.
it's not opposition, it's friendly.
All right, can I put something on the table briefly? A
Sure.
term, monolatry, which I believe is the term for a head god and little sub sacred beings. And my understanding from undergraduate and again graduate religion majors many years later, graduate level, is that Hinduism actually is not idolatry. Hinduism actually does have a concept of a head god, and then all these gods that in a temple are statues, or even sometimes in people's homes, are clearly recognized by Hindus as not being anywhere near as powerful. They just have their own little area of helping the head god take care of things. And from having grown up in northern Minnesota with a bunch of American Indians and living among them again in northern Canada, or Western Canada, I think that's what North American Indian animism is also, that there's clearly Manito, which is the head god, and has no form, but mountains and big trees and such are considered to be locations of sacrality that kind of reports to Manito, so to speak. And I'm wondering whether that would be a possible way of dealing with this language.
That certainly makes sense. All right, let's look at our next text. All right, Don, would you read, please?
You were always the help of our ancestors, a shield for them and their children, our deliverer in every generation. Though you abide at the pinnacle of the universe, your just decrees extend to the ends of the earth. Happy the one who obeys your mitzvot, who takes to heart the words of your Torah. You are in truth a mentor to your people, a defender and mighty ruler. You are first and you are last. We have no sovereign or redeemer but you. You rescued us from Egypt and redeemed us from the house of bondage. The firstborn of the Egyptians were slain. Your firstborn were saved. You split the waters of the sea. The faithful you rescued, the wicked drowned. The waters engulfed Israel's enemies. Not one of the arrogant remained alive. Then your beloved sang hymns of acclamation, extolling you with psalms of adoration. They acclaimed God, sovereign, great, and awesome, source of all blessing, the ever-living God, exalted in all majesty. God humbles the proud and raises the lowly, frees the captive and redeems the meek. God helps the needy and answers God's people's call. Praises to God supreme, who is ever praised. Moses and the people Israel joyfully sang this song to you. Who is like Adonai among all that is worshipped? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in splendor, working wonders? The redeemed sang a new song for you. They sang in chorus at the shore of the sea, acclaiming your sovereignty. Adonai shall reign throughout all time. Rock of Israel, arise to Israel's defense. Fulfill your promise to deliver Judah and Israel. Our Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel. Adonai Tzibaot. Praised are you, Adonai, Redeemer of the people Israel.
Thank you. And the context?
This is the morning prayer during which we say Chamocha.
Great. Short context, long text.
Yeah, the other one said it in a few words. The same thing.
All right. So this is the prayer during which we say Chamocha in the morning. There's a different set of words for the evening prayer, but a similar theme. So our first question, what does it mean to be redeemed? If we're talking about God redeeming us, what does it mean to be redeemed?
Is free from slavery, I believe, in this case.
Okay.
Is it free up to the level of being free men and women?
Great. Thank you. Other thoughts on the matter?
More than
I do have
more than forgiving us, I think it's validating us.
Hmm. Okay. Herb, you had a question?
Something a little bit off the track, but it says here that God killed all the firstborn of Egypt and saved all our firstborn. Yet Pharaoh was a firstborn. Pharaoh was looked upon by the Egyptians as a god. I wonder if the Egyptians could have seen that every firstborn was killed but Pharaoh, therefore reinforcing their view of Pharaoh as a god who our God has no power over
Hmm.
because he didn't kill him.
That's possible.
Been a weakness in our story, I think.
Yes, I think that he may have lost some credibility if he couldn't manage to get back the Israelites at the sea and save his army. But yes, it is a potential flaw in the story. Other thoughts about what it means to be redeemed?
They were like new people and just, filled with different wonderful thoughts, because the song was a new song. It wasn't an old song. It was, they were saved, redeemed, blessed. And so then they could articulate it in the way of a song.
Hmm. Nice.
The way, again, we're kind of at the mercy of the translator, but the way I'm looking at some of these words in this passage is that we were redeemed, but we were redeemed because we were weak. We were weaker than the Egyptians. We didn't have the power, the military might of Pharaoh and the army and all of that. And I think later in history, redemption isn't just for the meek, isn't just for the underdog, so to speak. But I think we're kind of, because we're starting the journey metaphorically at the sea, I think it's kind of almost the lowest point. Then we go to get the law, and then we eventually get to the land of Israel. Redemption, I think, comes into more full, into more fullness. But I think at this point, if you look at this reading, it looks like, God is helping us because we can't help ourselves, because we are so weak and we are under such domination by the Egyptians.
Hmm. Nice.
Dictionary says save one from sin, error, or evil, or to regain possession. Did God regain possession of the Israelis, of Israel, or the
Arguably, yes.
or the saved, or we were saved from sin or error, or the evil of slavery?
So a Pidyon Haben is a redemption of the firstborn, where you regain possession of your firstborn that should have been given to the service of God. So when Moses told God, "Let my people go," when Moses told Pharaoh that's the famous part. But the whole saying is, "Let my people go that they might serve me." Me being God here, not Moses. So God has redeemed us from the Egyptians who had possession of us, in order that God might have possession of us and we might be God's people.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, another question. Why are we asking for deliverance now after singing about how God already delivered our ancestors?
Could you repeat that again a little? Why
are we asking for deliverance now after singing about how God already delivered our ancestors? So in the Hebrew, this is the Tzor Yisrael Kuma Be'ezrat Yisrael Ufdeichinu Mecha Yehuda Ve'Yisrael Go'alenu Adonai Tzvaot Kadosh Yisrael Baruch Atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. That's the text that we're looking at in the Hebrew, and in the English, it's the second half of the part in italics after the last quotation marks.
So perhaps two different ones. The sort of obvious that we always need to be redeemed. coming through life. And more specifically in the morning, and particularly in prior times when night was dangerous, that we've made it through the dangers of the night and have been redeemed for the new day. Are two possible reasons. I'm just throwing them out.
Nice, thank you. Other thoughts why we might be asking for redemption after we've already said that God redeemed us?
I start coming back to the, that we think we were all at Mount Sinai
Mhm.
with the giving of the Torah. And this is another way of reinforcing that actually, now that I think about it, when we read in the Haggadah about Pesach, we're supposed to feel like we were there, that we were part of it. And so if we were supposed to think like we were part of it, then we should be thinking that we should be redeemed.
Interesting. What you're making me think of, Alan, is that multiple times in the Torah, not 36 like it claims in the Talmud, but multiple times in the Torah, it says you should care for the widow, the orphan, and the stranger, those who are vulnerable in society, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And so what you're making me think of is that by saying Mi Chamocha twice a day in the morning and the evening service, it helps us remember we were slaves in Egypt, ergo we should be, we should take care of those who are vulnerable in our society today.
Yeah, well, I mean, everything you're saying here is as if you're telling God that you did all of these things, but it's actually reminding ourselves. That's the way I look upon it. You don't need to remind God. He knows if he's omnipresent and he knows everything. I mean, you don't have to remind him. His memory doesn't fail. I mean,
Yeah.
Could I throw in something about how we think liturgy was put together? Originally, it was just the Chatimot. What Rabban Gamliel the first did in the year 100, give or take a few years, is he simply strung together the order of the Chatimot in the evening and morning services and a little bit in the afternoon.
The what?
And the Chatima, the Baruch Atah Adonai something something. So the oldest part of this thing, this is directly answering your issue of why talk about redeemed, redeemed, redeemed. The original prayer was simply Baruch Atah Adonai, Redeemer of the people Israel, and everything else was made up by whoever led the service. So that's the oldest part of the liturgy, and it didn't get written down in its contents until solidified until somewhere on the way to the very first Siddur being done in H65 by Rav Amram Groen. So that might be an answer for why redeemed throughout this thing. Originally, it was just the Praised Are You, Baruch Atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael, and everything else was just being made up by whoever's leading the prayer. That's what the theory is right now.
Interesting.
If this was the original song sung after they crossed the Red Sea, these people had been delivered from Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea, but they had no plan. They didn't know who they were. They didn't know what they were going to do. They were just lost at this point. So by singing the song and asking that God should continue to help them is what it sounds like. And then we got the Torah, and then we got led finally to the promised land. The question is, today, we know where we are, supposedly. Do we? Maybe we're still somewhat lost. We're still asking God to be redeemed from where we are to whatever is good for us coming next.
Following what Herb said, basically in the morning prayers, we read about God renewing the world every day. And I would think that in that, you know, we also need to be redeemed because our life is different every day. And so I think it's just, it just goes with that idea, you know, that if God is renewing the world every day, every minute, that, you know, that we still need to
Keep
be
a place for
redeemed.
us in it.
So,
Is there any connection to the fact that this is before the Amidah is recited?
There must be because the Jewish texts, starting with the Talmud, maybe even the Mishnah, are very clear that you have to connect this blessing about God redeeming the people of Israel it straight into the Amidah. And you can't have a break.
Right.
So there's a connection. I'll throw it out to the group. What?
Yeah, it's, he redeems you and then we praise him through, maybe as a, maybe worth praising and thanking and being grateful and
Well, it's very instructive because as we go into the Amidah, we're talking about redemption, and then we recite the Amidah, we are praising God. So then it's almost like, why are we praising God? Because God redeemed us. So it's almost like a mini lesson every time we pray. That's what I get out of it. That's probably, I'm thinking that's why it's in the service, in both the morning and the evening. And then also, even on Shabbat, we talk about, remembering and all of that. It's remembering this deed of God. So, I mean, we're always taught to remember, and I think it just comes out more distinctive as an introduction to the Amidah.
All right, looking at our next question. Who, Jewish or not, needs to be redeemed in our world today?
loaded.
Who does not need redemption?
What?
I didn't hear what you said.
Who does not need redemption in this world today?
Ah.
Before or after?
Each time we go to services on Shabbat, I feel like there's a form of redemption that we are praying for ourselves to become better people.
Nice.
I think this year of the pandemic has taught us that also, that that we need to be caring of each other and not only help redeem ourselves, but help redeem others.
Yeah. Which segs us to our next question. I'm going to skip question 4. But in the Talmud, Sota 14a, it says that we should emulate God's positive actions. So how does that inform your reading of this prayer?
Number 5.
we should redeem others who are in need of redemption from their particular slavery or oppression, is one way to look at that. And if that's too grandiose, then at least we should recognize that, well, when we say on Passover coming up, that we should regard ourselves not only that they were redeemed, but that we were redeemed, but that yes, that we were redeemed at this. I know that in his teaching that the Tanya, the Chabad founder, or the Alter Rebbe, says something like, this should be understood quite literally, as in each generation and each moment in your life, you're required to recognize this as an ongoing redemption, an ongoing need for redemption, which is a pretty heavy lift.
Well,
It
it's
also says, who is like you, Adonai, you redeemed us. There is none like you. So if God freed people and we're not like God, how can we redeem somebody? God is alone the ability to redeem, according to this.
Right.
Well, we may not be able to do what God did or does, but in our own way, we can help people. And this is a daily reminder. So if you kind of forgot to do it yesterday, or you passed up an opportunity to do it yesterday, there's a reminder that you can still do it today, as opposed to a once a year reminder, like on Yom Kippur, that, I didn't do it at all this year. It's got a lot of making up to do. Here's a chance to do it each and every day, and a reminder to do it each and every day.
So do we redeem ourselves? Is that the point? Do we have that power according to this kind of scripture?
I don't think I don't know if we're redeeming ourselves, but we're helping others. As someone else said, that, the redemption or the act of helping others is doing something that God would do.
Well, doesn't it say somewhere about being in the image of God? So that's how we can read that, to say God helps the needy and answers the people's call. And so if we can't be so proud to think we're as good as or better than, but that we have some of those attributes, and so that we can help other people. I mean, maybe help is an easier word to understand than redeem.
Well, you donate food you have a food drive, and
Right.
while you're doing that, you're trying to, in some small measure, free somebody from hunger, at least for a short period. Are you not saving somebody?
True.
Very pragmatic concept, but it's or you say you're redeeming people from or freeing them, so if you help them learn something so they can improve their lives, or anything where you're trying to help in somebody in your community, or do you want to use that as part of a foreign policy? I mean, it's a sliding scale, at least in my perspective.
Well, I think like anything else, if you take a very narrow read to the scripture and to this text, again, you'd say that this was directly reflecting the condition of Hebrews at the time in slavery, and God redeeming us and performing that act because there was no one else that could do that for us, not any other power, mortal or immortal. That was it. But then if you go beyond this, and the fact that we still have this as an important part of the liturgy thousands of years later, I think that's what allows us to interpret redemption the way we're doing it this evening, helping the hungry, helping, people that are in need, things we can do within our own power. But I think it starts with this very specific historic act that God did specifically for us, specifically for the Israelites at that time, and then we can interpret it to be more universal. That's what I'm getting out of it.
David, I
Yeah.
was looking up the definition of redemption. According to dictionaries, they say it has to do with redeeming something for something of value. So what, so if the Jews at the time of making it across the sea were redeemed, what was it of value that they gave in return?
Huh. I don't have a good answer. I do have a question. Was it that the Israelites gave something or that God gave something
Well,
to redeem us?
if God redeemed them, what did they give to God to be redeemed?
Ah. So it could be that they gave something to God in order for God to redeem them, or God gave something to the Egyptians in order to, like, I don't know, payment to release them or something like that.
I'm saying God took possession, able to repossess something. So was God repossessing his quote unquote chosen people? So then we could then serve him.
Charles, I'm sorry, I keep having these visions of, the guy going after the car that someone didn't keep up the loan on and repossessing it. I'm sorry, I just got that vision in my head.
Well,
I don't think it's what we want here.
I just think we're making it so complicated. God redeemed us and we paid him back by singing a new song and chorus, by claiming his sovereignty, and by doing good deeds.
I think we gave God our pledge at Mount Sinai that we would do and we shall hear. I think we pledged the covenant, and that's what our payment to God was for the redemption.
We have I think a precise answer if we want to see it in the when all of the firstborn have to be given to God, the firstborn of your flocks and your sheep, and also of your sons. And when we talk about the redemption of the firstborn, it's the same word that we have the pidyon haben.
Yeah.
We have this very archaic idea, but it's very real there. It's maybe suggested also in the binding of Isaac that God wants something back. So the Christians have a very precise answer. Yes, he gave his only begotten son, and that's how he redeemed the world.
All right, we are getting almost to the end of our time, so I'm going to show you quickly what we're not going to look at and what you can look at on your own, so you have some sense of what it is. This is a text that when the Israelites crossed the sea, the angels wanted to sing a song to God, and God said, "My creations are drowning in the sea, and like, how can you sing before me at this time?" Which connects to us taking drops of our grape juice out or wine during the Seder for the plagues. So the humans get to sing about, but the angels do not. Also, here's a text where it shows a time when the Israelites prayed to Baal, showing that we were not always monotheistic, but sometimes there were, among the things that were worshipped, sometimes we chose to worship something else besides God. So some text to explicate that part of Mi Chamocha. Then here's the original context of the entire Song of the Sea. And now we get to some music. So here's a little bit of information about singing about different tunes on the holidays and different Nusach tunes and different trope tunes. And I've asked my father to prepare a couple of Chamocha tunes, of which there are many, 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 for us to think about how the different tunes, what effect it has when you're hearing one tune versus another. So Abba, if you could share a Chamocha tune for us to think about how it makes us feel and what it makes us think of.
Okay, this is from a Hasidic service written in the 50s or 60s by a guy named Isidore Fried for Friday night. Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nehedar b'kodesh, no ra tehilot, o seifele, no ra tehilot, o seifele. And then the connecting part, Malchudecha, Rahuvanecha, etc. That is one from that era. And from a similar era, a guy named Abraham Wolf Binder did a version in the Saturday morning Nusach. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, no ra tehilot, o seifele, which is usually paired with Shira Harasha Shibakugulim Lishimcha Sevarayam, a little bit more upbeat. So there you have one from Friday night and one from Saturday. What are your thoughts and feelings about those two?
Right. So how do those different tunes, like, how do they affect how you feel about the words?
The second one seems more upbeat. It seems more familiar also.
Well, if these were written in the 50s and 60s, they were part of when I went to temple with my family in the 60s. So it's a little nostalgic. So it's funny, I'm not even thinking of the words, even though we spent an hour going over the text. I was thinking of where it places me because of the time frame. And I think music can be so powerful for that. So that's just my feeling on that.
Other reactions?
I think they both have a celebratory sound to them. It's a happy prayer, isn't it? It's celebrating freedom and redemption.
I think the first one for me is a little bit more, what's the word I'm thinking of? More happy, maybe. Very lively. The second one, I think, is more spiritual to some extent. And I can't explain why.
I would attribute the mode. Let me move on to compare that with what Debbie Friedman wrote. She wrote one in 72 and one in 88. And the one in 88 is more commonly done now. Mi chamocha, no, that's Richard Silverman. Dun da da chamo, mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, no ra tehilot o seifele, no ra tehilot o seifele. That one's only 30 years old, 30, 32, 33 years old.
Right. So how does that one compare? What does it make you think or feel?
It's not very spiritual.
Interesting. Ooh, okay.
Harder to sing.
Harder to sing, yeah.
I will tell you, it only works well with the guitar.
Yeah, it's Maybe it's too
Well, it's
much.
fun to sing along. It's a fun one to sing along with, but again, I don't think it necessarily resonates with the text. I mean, it's pretty. I think you use it a lot of times when there's young people in the service because it's a nice sing along, happy kind of tune. But I don't think personally doesn't connect me with the liturgy.
Very, very
I
nice.
agree.
Okay.
I agree with Doris. I thought the first two were very celebratory as opposed to the way I chant it now, or at least in my head, that I feel like it's a much more serious melody, and this would be like more common people saying it.
Maybe they're dancing and joyful. That's what they were doing with the
Yeah,
tambour.
but I don't think the way I say it is joyful. And
Ah.
that sounded joyful.
But Stuart sometimes brings in different melodies also from time to time.
Does.
I'd like each of them in a different way, but I mean, I think as you think about the evolution in just the last 40 years, 50 years of music, it's sort of 60 years, it sort of reflects periods I feel like I've lived through in terms of musicality. I'm just waiting to hear one created by you, Cantor Schwartz, in the next few months. That's in rap formation. The rapper Cantor Schwartz doing Mika Mocha really bring us to contemporary. And but I really do feel like it shows a prayer that can, evolve's the wrong word, but change with time for different generations and different peoples and the themes of those times. And nice. I mean, that's the thing I felt nice and positively about it.
I assure you, there are much newer ones than Debbie Friedman's. My congregation thinks that Debbie Friedman is cutting edge stuff that she wrote 30 years ago, but I assure you that people are still writing brand new melodies that I don't even try to sing.
But any rap, I want to know, is there a rapper saying Mika Mocha rapping?
Unfortunately, that hasn't made it into music yet. So
yeah, Madashaya. Yes, there's.
I don't know if Mati who has done a Mika Mocha yet.
Well, maybe not Mocha, but he certainly does rap.
If not a rap, we can have the Chaim sisters create a Mika Mocha.
Okay, that would be
Andrew, I have a question.
Yeah.
Mika Mocha, because it can be adopted to so many services, seasons of the year, whatever, and then I know the High Holy Day, Nusach is very different kind of regal. Is there a connection between the fact that Mika Mocha has so many variations because it is such a primal prayer that we've been talking about? It's in, twice a day and all of that. Is there any kind of connection? Because we don't do this with all the music. I mean, I know that a lot of the liturgy does reflect the time of the day and the season, but it seems Mika Mocha seems to be the most varied to my knowledge. I was just curious if you see any connection there between the text and the fact that it's adopted in so many different ways.
So as reflected in the stuff that David gave us in the part of the material that we didn't get to, but he just kind of zipped us by it visually a few minutes ago. Mika Mocha is particularly susceptible to using nusach to identify, for synagogues that actually pay attention to that sort of thing, to identify sacred time. Many, many ways of singing it that are unique to specific holidays and such. But on the other hand, at the exact same time, because it's a sing-along piece, much more even than the Shema, which is still being done the way Solomon Zolzer wrote it 150 years ago, people are still writing new Mika Mochas, and the mood among them is everything from, as you yourself just said, solemn and serious on the high holidays, all the way to make you want to get up out of your seat and dance, especially if it's being led by a guitarist who's being backed up by a drummer. And there are synagogues, including conservative ones, who actually do that sort of thing once in a while. So it's really become one of the favorite things for people to set because it's such a catchy and short phrase. And it's kind of helped by the fact that there's different connecting stuff in the morning and the evening. The Mika Mocha part's the same, and the Adonai Loch is the same, but the other text around it is slightly different. And so this pile of music I've got in front of me here actually has Debbie Friedman did not. She wrote hers for Friday night, but somebody else wrote a takeoff on it so it could be used in Saturday morning. It's unique to me, Chamocha in particular, that our good luck that David chose to have us study that tonight, because it's got such musical variety, nusach and trope and sing-along melodies of all ages.
Cantor, are there more melodies for Micha Mocha than for Adon Olam?
No, Adon Olam, unfortunately, can be sung to anything in 4/4. I've heard it sung to Christmas carols, occasionally, like on Simchas Torah. When I've had a couple of shots, I will do it to Yankee Doodle or to the Lone Ranger, but only on Simchas Torah.
All right. So with that, speaking of drinking, thank you all for joining us. And next week we will be learning about the story of the 4 cups.